Well, many thanks for staying tuned to LN 24/7. This is Global Business Today. Welcome. I am Yemisi Lanre-Ido. China and Morocco are tightening their relationship as Chinese President Xi Jinping made a short visit to Morocco on Thursday. That's yesterday. And according to state media from both countries, the Crown Prince Moulay El Hassan and Moroccan Prime Minister Aziz Al Khanouj welcomed Xi at the airport in Casablanca and had a cordial conversation. The visit reflected the strong bonds of friendship, cooperation and solidarity between the Moroccan and Chinese people. Xi made the visit after being in Brazil for the G20 summit, and China stepped up investment in Morocco's infrastructure and rail sector in recent years. Morocco's geographic location close to Europe, its free trade agreements with key EU and US markets, and its existing automotive industry makes it attractive to Chinese electric vehicle battery makers. In June, Chinese EV battery manufacturer Gotion High-Tech picked Morocco to set up Africa's first gigafactory for a total cost of $1.3 billion. And Morocco's inflation is slowing or showing signs of cooling, with the annual rate dipping to 0.7% in October, down from 0.8% in September. Well, the primary driver of inflation in the country remains food prices, which rose by 0.5% year on year. Non-food items also contributed to the overall inflation, increasing by 0.7% during the same period. Core inflation, which excludes volatile items such as food and energy, saw a 0.3% month-on-month increase in October and a 2.5% rise year on year. The slight decline in headline inflation reflects stable economic conditions, although the increase in core inflation indicates persistent underlying pressures in certain sectors. Well, in a bold move tied to international corruption allegations, Kenyan President William Ruto announced the cancellation of two major deals with India's Adani Group during a State of his Nation address on Thursday. The decision follows the indictment of Adani Group founder Gautam Adani in the U.S. on charges of paying $265 million in bribes to Indian officials. The first deal, worth nearly $2 billion, would have handed control of Nairobi's Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to the Adani Group for 30 years in exchange for building a second runway and upgrading the terminal. Well, a second $736 million agreement signed just last month tasked an Adani subsidiary with constructing power transmission lines under another 30-year contract. Ruto's announcement drew thunderous applause and cheers from lawmakers in Parliament, reflecting widespread public unease over the deals, which critics say lacks transparency and value for money. Over now to South Africa, where the rand slipped slightly in early trade Friday as the dollar climbed to a fresh 13-month high on global markets. The rand traded at 18.1275 against the dollar, down about 0.2% on Thursday's closing level, while the dollar was up around 0.1% against a basket of other major currencies. The rand has been bolstered this week by the South African Reserve Bank opting for a small cut to its main interest rate, quashing hopes for a larger move, and by decision by S&P Global to raise the outlook on the country's sovereign credit rating. But the local currency remains highly sensitive to global drivers, including expectations for U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's policies. Well, 12 firms producing almost a third of global oil and gas have invested close to $100 billion in low-carbon tech since 2017. But critics have argued that the industry's decarbonization efforts remain underpowered. That's talking about carbon emissions. Now, the company's invested a record $29.7 billion in low-carbon technology alone. Now, what's the implication of all of these to Africa's decarbonization efforts? Well, the Chair Executive Committee of OGCI, that's Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, and head of Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter, OGDC Secretariat, that's COP28, Bijan Otto Sverdrup, joins me now. Many thanks for your time, Bijan. Well, let's begin this way. With a significant presence of African national oil companies among OGDC's 54 signatories, how is the OGDC prioritizing the specific needs of African oil-producing countries in terms of capacity building in oil?
Yeah, so the charter brings together more than 54 different companies from truly across the globe. Each of the companies having a different starting point, different parts, and there are different stages of the journey on decarbonization, and all of them are also placed in different national contexts. So for us, it's been extremely important to try to spend time understanding the specific needs of each company and how could we be supportive. That's in particular the case for the African companies that we're so proud to host. So we've been doing workshops to try to tailor-made how could we understand the particular challenges and how that we could be the most effective. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So energy access is energy shortage in Africa. So particularly flaring, methane emissions reductions are important because it's a lot of energy. How could we channel that? We also know that some African companies are struggling to, or haven't really started that much on how do you measure and report your emissions. That's also an area where we've been spending quite some time to provide support. And we're also seeing technologies, trying to take technologies from one geography into another geography and giving a support to a bit of a push. But I must say I'm impressed by the enthusiasm shown by many of the national African oil companies to engage and to be part of this community.
Well, that's interesting to know what Africa is doing there. Now, the Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter outlines ambitious goals such as net zero operations by 2050 and near zero methane emissions by 30, I beg your pardon. How do you envision African signatories, many of which face unique infrastructure and economic challenges, meeting these targets without compromising?
I think access to energy, access to welfare, good operations goes hands in hand with reducing emissions over time. These are not opposites, but it's more of the same. Give you a couple of examples. If you have high degree of methane leaks, you're losing your product. The same as if you're flaring off your natural gas, you're not putting valuable resources to work. So these go hand in hand, and I think African companies take great pride in running well-structured professional operations, and we need to provide the technology and give support to make that happen.
Well, energy support to make it happen. Well, OGCI's methane emissions targets have set industry benchmarks, even being included in policy frameworks like the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act. Now, what lessons from OGCI's initiatives could be applied within African regulatory environments to incentivize sustainable practices?
So methane or methane is actually invisible gas. It's also without any smell. So it's a technological challenge to be able to detect methane leaks. For the last couple of years, I think we've seen nearly like a revolutionary time on methane, because we have technology now to make this gas visible. We have policies coming together. We have awareness among in the industry. So there's a whole lot of developments making this is a unique period. And policy plays an important role. So what we have done with the OGCI is we have helped develop what is a good performance look like, how should companies go about, and what is a good standard. And that standard we have set as an industry is also finding its way into government regulations. So we encourage sound regulations on methane emissions, and that should probably also inspire African nations to do the same.
All right, so now, Bijan, as the world prepares for COP29, How do you see OGDC engaging with African leaders and industry stakeholders to ensure that Africa's unique position as both a key energy producer and a region highly vulnerable to climate impact is effectively represented in global carbon emission strategy?
So, of course, Africa plays a key role in addressing the climate challenge, both and also on the energy challenge. This week we gathered many African companies. They played an important role in the charter. And next week, the COP will be meeting. Again, we will gather African companies, and they will be at the forefront of the discussion, leading the way. And I think they are also not standing out there alone. They're also part of a broader coalition of industry, knowing that there are other companies eager to support and share practices.
Well, Bijan also, the Chair, Executive Committee of OGC, I must say thank you so much for your time on Global Business today. We appreciate it. You're watching Global Business Today. Well, the Eurozone business activities have hit a 2-year low. Now, what's behind this drop? You'll find out when we return. Well, this is Global Business Today. The rush for Bitcoin continues over the spark and expectations of a more friendly regulatory environment under a Donald Trump administration. The cryptocurrency touched a fresh record high Friday, with its sights set firmly on the $100,000 barrier. It has more than doubled in value this year and is up about 45% since Trump's sweeping election victory on November the 5th, which has also seen a slew of pro-crypto lawmakers being elected to Congress. The cryptocurrency was last up just over 1% on the day at $99,000.380 and is on track for its best monthly performance since February. Its surge has made Bitcoin one of the standout winners of so-called Trump trades, assets that are seen as winning or losing from Trump's policies. And there's a sign of a rise in U.S.-China tensions, which seem to have started to impact global capital flows. And this comes as governor of Texas has ordered state agencies to stop investing in China and sell assets there as soon as possible, citing financial and security risks. In a letter to state agencies dated November the 21st and posted to his website, Republican Greg Abbott said belligerent actions of China's ruling Communist Party had increased risks to Texas investment in China and told investors to get out. Texas has been taking an increasingly activist stance in its agency's investments, having previously restricted public pension funds from doing business with Wall Street firms that have embraced environmental, social, and governance principles. Well, according to its annual report, its state agencies include the Teacher Retirement System of Texas, which had $10.5 billion under management at the end of August. Well, China is willing to conduct active dialogue with the U.S. based on the principles of mutual respect and promote the development of bilateral economic and trade relations. China's international trade representative and Vice Commerce Minister Wang Shouwen, while responding to a question about the impact of potential tariffs from U.S. President-elect Donald Trump in Beijing on Friday said China would be able to resolve and resist the impact of external shocks. He also said China is willing to expand areas of cooperation and manage differences with the U.S. But with Trump's threat to impose tariffs in excess of 60% in all Chinese goods, which has rattled Chinese manufacturers and accelerated factory relocation to Southeast Asia and other regions, Chinese exporters are bracing for any trade disruptions. Well, after days of protest, the French hardline Farmers Union Coordination Rural has declared an end to its blockade of an industrial estate in Bassant near Bordeaux Commercial Port. The union, one of the last major groups actively demonstrating from a recent wave of agricultural protests, said it was satisfied with the government's response to their demands. The protests were fueled by frustrations over stringent European agricultural standards, which farmers argue put them at a competitive disadvantage. However, Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne's recent commitments to address these concerns were enough to convince the union to lift the blockade, marking what it called a very clear victory for farmers. Well, Sweden's defense ministers raised alarms over ship movement near the locations where two undersea telecom cables were mysteriously severed, sparking concerns of potential sabotage. The Silion 1 submarine cable connecting Helsinki and the German port of Rostock was cut sort of south of Åland Island in Swedish waters, some 700 kilometers from Helsinki. Early Sunday, another telecoms cable, the Arlian running from the Swedish Baltic Sea island of Gotland to Lithuania, was also damaged. The incidents have disrupted communications between Finland, Germany and Lithuania and Sweden, all of which have launched separate investigations into the incident.
Well, what I can confirm is, of course, that the incident happened outside the island of Öland and another outside the island of Gotland, that there has been ship movement in that region, that there is an inquiry going on right now by the Swedish police authorities, and they're investigating this as an act of possible sabotage, but I can't speculate in specific vessels that could be involved at this stage. This is a very serious matter, that the communication cable between Sweden and Lithuania is affected, and I think there's a possibility that they can mend the cable as such. And as far as I understand, the communication between Sweden and Lithuania was not affected because it's possible to reroute the traffic. But we are dependent, of course, of communication cables on the seabed, and we've taken a number of measures during the last 2 years in strengthening our capability to handle threats on the seabed.
Well, the 12th International Defense Exhibition and Seminar is underway in Karachi, drawing visitors from around the globe to explore cutting-edge defense technology and innovations. The event, which began on November the 19th and runs until Friday, that's today, has impressed attendees with its showcase of high-quality products, many of which are already making their mark in international markets. Visitors have expressed sunrise and admiration at the range and sophistication of the items on display, highlighting the lesser-known capabilities of local industries in producing world-class defense exports. Well, markets upped their bets on European Central Bank ECB rate cuts after the euro plunged to a 2-year low on Friday as data showed a tumble in Eurozone business activities. The common currency dipped 1%, over 1% at one point to its lowest level since November 2022 and was last down 0.6% on the day at $1.0412 thousand after the data which showed the bloc's dominant services industry contracted and manufacturing sunk deeper into recession. Markets also raised their expectations of ECB rate cuts and see a more than 50% chance of a larger than usual 50 basis point rate cut in December. The euro also fell 0.44% against the Swiss franc. It weakened against the pound, but then paired declines. after soft British PMI data. The euro has been weakening against the dollar since Donald Trump's victory in the U.S. presidential election. And despite the escalated war between Russia and Ukraine, gold, oil and haven assets from the Swiss franc to German government debt headed for strong weekly gains on Friday. On its part, European gas price rose and poor economic data heaped pressure on the euro. In a week when Russia lowered its threshold for using nuclear weapons and fired a hypersonic intermediate-range ballistic missile at Ukraine, gold was set for its best week in a year. The euro tumbled to its lowest since December 2022, last at $1,000.0432 and down 0.4% on the day after surveys showed business activity in the bloc took a surprisingly sharp turn for the worse this month. European gas contracts hit a one-year high, broadening concerns for the Eurozone economy already pressured by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's proposed trade tariffs, Germany's government collapse, and France's wide budget deficit. And with the details from those havens there, we'll wrap up Global Business today. Many thanks for your time. Don't forget you could also get more on our social media handles as well as our content hub at www.ln247.news. I am Yemisi Landredo. I'll see you again.